Before we begin, I want you to stop whatever you're doing for just a moment. Take a deep breath. Now think about the one thing you've been asking God for. Maybe it's a breakthrough. Maybe it's healing. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's direction for your future. Whatever it is, you've prayed about it more times than you can count. You've cried over it. You've worried about it. You've trusted God with it. Yet here you are, still waiting. And perhaps lately, you've started asking yourself a difficult question. God, where are you? Because if we're honest, waiting is hard. It's easy to trust God when prayers are being answered. It's easy to have faith when doors are opening. It's easy to praise when blessings are flowing. But what about when heaven seems silent? What about when the answer doesn't come? What about when months turn into years? What about when everybody else seems to be moving forward while you're standing still? Those are the moments that test faith. Those are the moments that reveal what's truly inside our hearts. And those are the moments when many people begin to believe a dangerous lie, that God has forgotten them. But what if the opposite is true? What if your waiting season is actually proof that God is paying closer attention to your life than ever before? What if the delay isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? Stay with me, because today we're going to uncover one of the most powerful truths about faith. Sometimes God's greatest work happens while we're waiting. The hidden purpose of waiting. Most people hate waiting. We naturally want things now. We want immediate results, immediate answers, immediate blessings, immediate success. The world teaches us that faster is always better. But God often works differently. God is not interested merely in giving you what you want. He's interested in helping you become who He created you to be. And becoming the person God designed you to be takes time. Think about nature. A mighty oak tree does not appear overnight. A mountain isn't formed in a day. A diamond isn't created instantly. The most valuable things in creation require time, pressure, and development. Why would our spiritual lives be any different? Many people pray for blessings. Few pray for the character needed to handle those blessings. Many pray for opportunities. Few pray for the wisdom required to manage those opportunities. Many pray for success. Few pray for the maturity necessary to sustain success. But God sees the complete picture. He knows that receiving something too early can sometimes be more dangerous than never receiving it at all. That's why He often works on us before He works around us. The problem with human timing. One of our biggest struggles is that we want God's promises according to our schedule. We want God to move when we think He should move. We want answers when we think we're ready. We want blessings according to our timeline. But God operates from an eternal perspective. He sees tomorrow. He sees next year. He sees 5 years from now. He sees things that we cannot possibly see. Imagine a child asking a parent for something dangerous. The child might sincerely want it. The child might cry for it. The child might even become upset when denied. But a loving parent sees what the child cannot see. The parent understands consequences. The parent understands risks. The parent understands timing. In the same way, there are moments when God says, "Not yet," because He sees what we don't. And sometimes what feels like rejection is actually protection. Many people spend years disappointed over closed doors, then later realize those closed doors saved them from heartbreak, saved them from failure. saved them from wrong relationships, saved them from wrong opportunities, saved them from paths that would have taken them away from God's purpose. At the time, they couldn't understand it, but later, everything made sense. God works in silence. One of the hardest parts about waiting is silence. We often assume silence means inactivity, but that's rarely true. Think about a seed planted underground. For weeks, nothing appears above the surface. No visible growth, no visible progress, nothing exciting. If someone looked only at the surface, they might conclude nothing is happening. But beneath the ground, everything is happening. Roots are spreading, strength is developing, life is forming, preparation is taking place. The growth is invisible, yet it's essential. In many ways, God works like that. Some of the most important seasons of your life happen where nobody can see them. Your faith develops in private. Your character develops in private. Your patience develops in private. Your relationship with God develops in private. The world celebrates public victories. God often focuses on private preparation. And the preparation season is what determines how well you'll handle the blessing season. Why God cares? More about your character than your comfort. This is something many people struggle to understand. God's primary goal isn't your comfort, it's your transformation. If comfort were God's highest priority, life would be much easier. There would be no waiting, no challenges, no struggles, no difficult seasons. But challenges often produce growth. Pressure often produces strength. Waiting often produces faith. And faith is one of the most valuable things you can possess. Anyone can believe when circumstances are perfect. Faith becomes meaningful when circumstances are difficult. Faith becomes powerful when you continue trusting despite uncertainty. Faith grows when you refuse to quit. That is why waiting seasons often become faith-building seasons. The delay itself becomes part of God's process, the story you can't see. Yet, one reason waiting feels frustrating is because we're trying to understand a story that's still being written. Imagine reading only one chapter of a book. If the chapter contains conflict, loss, confusion, or difficulty, you might assume the story ends badly. But you haven't reached the final chapter. You don't know how the story unfolds. Many people judge God's plan from a single chapter of their lives. A chapter of struggle, a chapter of disappointment, a chapter of waiting, a chapter of uncertainty. But God sees the entire book. He sees how today's struggle connects to tomorrow's breakthrough. He sees how today's lesson prepares you for tomorrow's opportunity. He sees how today's delay protects tomorrow's blessing. The chapter you're currently living is not the whole story. And that's important to remember. Trusting God without understanding everything. Many people think faith means understanding everything. Actually, faith often means trusting God when you don't understand. Think about how difficult that is. We naturally want explanations. We want reasons. We want certainty. We want clarity. But God doesn't always provide immediate explanations. Instead, He often invites us to trust Him. Trust is easier when circumstances make sense. Trust becomes difficult when circumstances don't. That's why waiting seasons reveal the depth of our faith. When answers are delayed, we discover whether our trust depends on results or on God Himself. And that's a powerful lesson. Because real faith isn't based on favorable circumstances. Real faith is based on confidence in God's character. It's believing that God is good even when life feels difficult. It's believing that God is working even when evidence seems limited. It's believing that God remains faithful even when we can't see the outcome. Sometimes, God is preparing people around you. Here's something many people overlook. Sometimes, God isn't only preparing you. Sometimes, He's preparing other people. Perhaps the opportunity you're waiting for involves someone else's decision, someone else's growth, someone else's timing, someone else's journey. God works in countless lives simultaneously. He orchestrates circumstances in ways we could never fully comprehend. That's why delays aren't always about us. Sometimes God is aligning people, situations, and opportunities that must come together at exactly the right moment. And because we can only see our perspective, we often fail to recognize the larger picture. Yet God sees it all. Every detail, every connection, every possibility, every outcome. Nothing escapes His attention. The danger of quitting too soon. One of the greatest tragedies is when people quit during the preparation season. Because preparation rarely feels exciting. Growth rarely feels dramatic. Progress often feels slow. And waiting can become exhausting. That's why many people give up. They stop believing, they stop trusting, they stop hoping, not realizing they may be closer than they think. Imagine digging for water. You've already dug 90 feet. The water is at 95 feet, but you quit at 90. You never discover how close you were. Many people do that spiritually. They stop trusting right before the breakthrough. They stop believing right before the answer. They stop praying right before the door opens. Which is why persistence matters. Not because persistence earns God's favor, but because persistence keeps your faith alive. During difficult seasons, God's delays are often God's protection. One of the hardest truths to accept is that sometimes the very thing we're frustrated about today becomes the thing we're grateful for tomorrow. Have you ever looked back at a situation and thought, "Thank God that didn't happen"? At the time, you were disappointed. At the time, you were confused. At the time, you couldn't understand why the door stayed closed. But later, you realized that God was protecting you from something you couldn't see. Maybe it was the wrong relationship. Maybe it was the wrong opportunity. Maybe it was the wrong environment. Maybe it was the wrong timing. The reality is that God sees consequences before we see choices. He sees where roads lead before we even step onto them. And because He loves us, He sometimes delays what we want in order to give us what we need. That doesn't mean waiting is easy, but it does mean waiting has purpose. The season nobody talks about. Everyone loves talking about miracles. Everyone loves talking about breakthroughs. Everyone loves talking about answered prayers. But very few people talk about the waiting season that came before those moments. Yet almost every great story includes a season of waiting. A season where nothing seemed to happen. A season where progress appeared invisible. A season where faith was tested. Those seasons are rarely celebrated, but they are often where the greatest growth occurs. Because waiting teaches lessons success never can. Waiting teaches patience. Waiting teaches humility. Waiting teaches dependence on God. Waiting teaches perseverance. Waiting teaches trust. And these qualities become the foundation for everything God wants to build in your life. What if God answered every prayer immediately? Think about this for a moment. What if God answered every prayer the second you prayed it? No waiting, no preparation, no growth, no lessons. Would we truly become the people He created us to be? Probably not. Because many of life's greatest lessons come through the process. The process develops us. The process strengthens us. The process transforms us. The process teaches us things that instant answers never could. And while we often focus on reaching the destination, God frequently focuses on shaping us during the journey. The destination matters, but the person you become on the way there matters even more. God is working, even when you can't see it. One of the enemy's favorite lies is this: nothing is happening. When prayers seem unanswered, nothing is happening. When doors stay closed, nothing is happening. When progress feels slow, nothing is happening. But that isn't true. Just because you cannot see movement doesn't mean God isn't moving. Think about sunrise. The darkest hour often comes right before the light appears. Yet, during that darkness, the sun is still rising. You simply can't see it yet. The same can be true spiritually. God may be working behind the scenes in ways you don't recognize. He may be opening doors you've never imagined. He may be removing obstacles you don't know exist. He may be preparing opportunities you haven't discovered. He may be arranging circumstances that will eventually make perfect sense. Your inability to see His work doesn't mean His work has stopped.